Azure.net, and we have Christos with us today all the way from Seattle. And now I know we usually say to heck or heavily, but it's 2 a.m. at the moment in Seattle, and Christos has stayed up specially or got up specially to present today. So maybe keep that in mind, and for any tricky demos, I'm sure they'll work very well.
Hey, thank you for having me, guys. I mean, it's great to be here, and I really appreciate that. It's actually so many firsts for me today. So it's the first session I'm delivering at 2 a.m. in the morning, which is brilliant. And it's the first talk I'm ever doing to an Australian audience, a pure Australian audience. I probably had Australians before in my audience, but never to these numbers. So it's great to be here, and I have some exciting stuff to talk about. In fact, today we're doing a lot of preview things that you're gonna see landing in GA over the next coming weeks and months. So many new things, and so many exciting things, and so many moving my cheese things as well. So let's take it from the top, and then feel free to interject at any point. If there are questions while I'm doing these things and you want to ask about stuff, then feel free to stop me. I don't have a
So the live stream is really, really confident in terms of jumping in on Twitch and asking all sorts of random questions.
Yes.
Probably more a case of filtering out the bad ones.
It's fine.
Pretty generally all of them with our audience, but we'll do that.
I will say, bring on the hard questions. How about that?
That sounds good. And we've got the usual giveaway of the JetBrains license. So pay attention, stay to the end, and we'll ask the questions at the end for the 2 free licenses.
We've got to make sure they're good questions, right?
I'll do my best.
made up questions, the ones that we pre-agreed before the session. You know?
You're referring to that preparation time we did.
Yeah, it's like the dry run.
One of the things we do like to do, obviously, before we get into the main content is just run through any announcements, things that have been happening in the industry. No, not 3 licenses this time, 2. And the only thing really of note that's been happening, obviously, actually, I should just pause for 1 second and say, for anyone who's joining us from one of the COVID-affected areas, stay safe. Wear your masks. We know what's going on in all parts of the world, Seattle in particular, and Melbourne in Victoria, for those who are involved. So definitely stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, be good, and spend all your indoor time focusing on the cool tech that's coming, I can speak, that's coming out at the moment. .NET 5 Preview 7 dropped last week, which was what we talked about previous iteration of alt.NET when we went through some of the C#9 features. If you've got VS 2019 previews, you'll have a copy of that on your machine already. So feel free to turn on the preview language settings and start playing with things. Grab the code, explore. It's pretty much baked now. There's a few things still to come, apparently, according to the team, but should be moving into RC very soon, which is exciting because then it means 5 is not far away. So definitely have a look at that link. I'll actually post the link in the Twitch stream right now because I know how to copy and paste. And I can't think of anything else that read. Well, sorry, I'm having a laugh because David in the chat decided he should take his mask off before typing. Is there anything else that's come up in the last month tech-wise that we should pay attention to, James?
Nothing springs to mind.
Nothing springs to mind. Yeah. So in that case, we might throw to Christos then and get into the meat of it.
I can start with an announcement if you want.
Oh,
we did announce the sunsetting of ADAL.NET. So if you are working with Identity and Azure AD and B2C, then ADAL used to be the old library, the Azure Active Directory Access Library.
Yep.
And now that's been changed to MSAL. Now, MSAL has been out for a while, but we always had this kind of a disconnect, and people were asking, why should I use MSAL when ADAL is working absolutely fine and stuff? So we made the decision for you. In a typical Microsoft way, we decided that it's time for us to sunset a very old library.
So we still
to use the new stuff. So MSAL is the new library. It's supported across many languages. The nice thing about MSAL is that it does support the V2 endpoints on Azure AD, and you also get a lot of stuff for free out of the box, like incremental consent. So when you create an app and then you say, I want my app to access an X API, and then further down the line you decide to add another API or another permission, you don't have to write your app. You don't have to go back and rewrite the code. It allows the users to give incremental consent and say, you know what, I want to access the additional APIs. So that's all out of the box. You also get two-factor authentication. You also get support for hardware keys, so FIDO keys if you want to use that, and you don't have to code anything. As a developer, you get all that for free while you just use the library. All you have to do is just migrate your code. And talking about streams, we also stream on Twitch as well. So MSID Dev, I'll put it on the chat, is where we stream every Tuesday, and all our sessions are recorded. And the nice thing is that we cover these things, like how do I migrate from ADAL to MSAL? We try to cover all the languages and all the frameworks, and even AWS and Google Cloud. So if you are working with this technology, you don't have to be a .NET fan or a developer to see what we're doing. Come and join us every Tuesday and every Thursday at normal Seattle time. So normal is, I would say, 7 a.m. My partner in crime is at Eastern times, so that means that when we actually do things, he's always 3 hours ahead of me. So we said, let's do an early session, and that early session became a 7 a.m. session. So I'm getting used to being up super early in the morning. Right.
The good news is that in Seattle, given it's 32 in the middle of the day, then this time of night's actually normal Seattle temperature for you.
Dude, it's still so super hot for us today, and I'm like sweating in here. Anyway, let's ignore all these things and let's do some fun stuff today. I don't know if you want to switch to my slides so we can quickly get this out of the way. I don't want to do too many slides today, but I will have some covering the top stuff. So today we'll be covering secure and scalable apps with .NET and Azure. Some of the things that we will be discussing do not have to run on Azure, but the majority of them are fairly well tied into Azure, which I like, especially if you're a .NET developer. We make your life so much easier. Quick word about me. I am a program manager for Microsoft. I'm working at the Identity division in the developer experience and developer evangelism. I like to inspire developers to achieve more and build stuff with our tools, whether it's .NET, Node, Java, what have you, as long as you use something in our platform like VS Code or Azure or both, then that's amazing. I'm also a father and a husband. I like to work in open source, and I am Greek and geek. So I come from Greece. I grew up there, and at the age of 20, I moved to the UK to do some coding and meet my wife. So today I want to talk to you about security and the developer challenges that we see out there. When it comes to creating applications, the biggest challenges that we come across as any developer on any platform and any language, I have like probably 5 points that try to encapsulate most of the challenges, but there are other things out there as well. So definitely security at rest, which is like, how do I store my data securely? So if somebody gets access to my database server, they won't be able to read any of the data. Security in transit. So how do I communicate to my services securely on the wire? So HTTPS, certificates, and yes, sometimes it's easy, sometimes not easy. Like even, people that do them every day can screw up with certificates. So we know that this can be challenging sometimes. Authenticating and authorizing users and services, that can be tricky, especially in the .NET space. I just announced that we changed libraries. So you're like, oh man, in .NET, everything is moving. Everything's a moving target. .NET 5 is coming out. So there will be new things landing in .NET 5. We'll discuss about these new things today. But authenticating and authorizing users has typically been quite tricky in .NET, but also in Node and Java. There's a lot of code and boilerplate stuff that you need to write to make it secure and robust. Accessing data securely with right permissions, that's also very important. So if you have data somewhere on the cloud or somewhere on-prem, how do you access them securely, and how do you ensure that the account that you're using has the right permissions. And oh, sorry, I shouldn't have pressed that one. And finally, deploying code to production securely. So how do you do your DevOps securely, or DevSecOps as they call it? There are so many tools and services out there by checking dependencies to make sure that they're not compromised, or they don't have any security issues, to making sure that as you deploy your code, you don't put any secrets out there in the wild that could be compromising your solution. And today we'll be looking at what do we have in terms of the Microsoft Identity platform that can help you address most of these things. I probably won't be touching the first two because there are tools inside Azure and on-prem that allow you to do security at rest. So if you're using databases, we have a flick of switch that allows you to encrypt at rest, for example, if you want to. Security in transit, most of the services these days require HTTPS, so it's almost impossible to not do HTTPS, and not advisable these days. So we will give you the right options to set up HTTPS and certificates and what have you, even inside Azure. So super easy there. But the other three ones are the ones I like to focus for this session. And you might say, well, it's 2020. We should be pretty good at this thing, right? We know exactly what we're doing. But if you go out there and look at the web, if you do a search on Google or Bing and say, I want to create a registration form for ASP.NET, then one of the first results that you'll see is this one. There's a whole, I think I have the URL at the bottom. There's a whole example written that is insecure from beginning to the end. Even Troy Hunt, your favorite security person in Australia, has come out to say that, this is not something that should be out there on the web, but because so many people actually access it, and I'm probably exacerbating the issue by giving the URL, so you're gonna go and look at it today. We're gonna make this person super popular, right? But the whole point is that if you are dealing with authentication and authorization, many people, even me, have done the unheard of, and I went and rolled out my own authentication system end to end, which was awful, and it's super complicated, and you won't get it right, and there are so many things that can go wrong that today we advise against it. But this is what you'll see out there, and it's one of the things that new developers will come and look, and then they go like, oh, okay, that's a great end-to-end solution. I'm going to use this one and implement that one, and then you end up in the news. So we don't want you to be in the news. We want you to have secure solutions. From an Azure AD perspective, when you use Azure Active Directory to secure your applications, you have to register an app. This is very common. Registering an app is creating an identity inside Azure AD that says, I'm going to be using Azure AD for X reason, usually for authenticating against Azure AD or authorizing against Azure AD or performing another task. And at minimum, you need to create that app registration. Then you need to provide you get a client ID. In many cases, you'll get a secret that can be an X509 certificate or a string. And then you provide some scopes. You might say, I want to use ARM or Office or MS Graph or whatever. But the problem is that when you do this, your application needs to have a secret stored somewhere, which is not always recommended. Okay, let's see. We have some questions, I think. No, we don't have any questions yet.
Just Aaron joining us and saying hi. Hi, Aaron.
Oh, nice. Hey, Aaron.
Yeah.
Good.
Apparently he didn't want to join us tonight because he's been talking all day running a workshop. So
I get the feeling.
So, I mean, who's up at 2 a.m. and who's not?
Exactly, that's the test. Tell me about it. So going back into secrets, right? I don't want developers to have to worry about secrets. I don't want them to not do it right. And we do know that by littering your solutions with secrets and passwords and not manage them correctly can actually result to a lot of bad things. Let's take Twitter, for example. Only a couple of weeks ago, everybody in the universe should have heard about the Twitter hack. It was not a direct brute force attack to their infrastructure. It was more of a social engineering attack to some of the users. the problem there that these developers or these people that were working on the platform should not have access to production systems unless they were explicitly doing it for a specific reason. In fact, when I was working as a premier field engineer in the UK, we always advised the break glass approach, where you actually have a safe that your IT pros will have to go in and get the access to the production systems, because if you are building secure systems, you don't want anyone at any time to have access. There should be a just-in-time access, elevated access to your production systems without really knowing the secrets, and those secrets should be rotated. So one of the problems with the secrets, obviously, is that, or some of the problems that you'll find with the secrets is that you will, it's very hard to rotate your secrets yourself. Like, you have some secrets, some API keys, some connection strings in your applications. How many of these? Usually you don't know. And I've been in many examples where companies will have a number of web configs sitting out there without really realizing how many secrets they had. It provides exposure. So because in most of the cases, there's a mature code out there that has been running for 10, 15 years, 20 years, developers tend not to touch these things. So if there's a web config out there, or there's an app config out there with some secrets, it's working fine, let's leave it, don't touch it. Scaling as well with those secrets can be challenging, especially if you change something in one instance and they have to go and change it on all the other instances. Cloud has made it a little bit easier. So if you are running, say, on app service and you want to scale out, the scale out of that app service is fairly easy. You just slide the slider and you say, I want 10 more instances. We'll copy the code across. So your config goes along with it. But at the same time, it can be challenging and error-prone code as well. Trying to access these things does provide runtime exposure to certain values. So that can always be challenging. We recommend against it. Now you might say, well, Chris, that's all nice and well. So how do we address this issue? How do we avoid having to store secrets and or connection strings or things both in development and QA and production, and it's not easy. So Microsoft actually came up with this thing called a managed service identity, which is fantastic because it actually addresses some of the items that we addressed earlier on, the challenges. So we have security at rest, authenticating and authorizing users and services, and accessing data securely with right permissions. So what are managed identities? In effect, these are automated accounts or user-managed accounts that you create, and they're backed by Azure AD. But as you develop inside Visual Studio and you need to access your Key Vault or you need to access your database, you don't have to explicitly provide the credentials to that. I am developing on my local machine. I'm still accessing my data on Azure securely using a managed identity or your local account that acts as a managed identity. And then when you move that application to production, when you run it in Azure, there's another production managed identity that is explicitly configured to speak between, say, an app service and your database, or your Kubernetes cluster and app service, or your it's like container instance to your Key Vault. And managed identities handle the service principal secret rotation for you. So we will rotate the secrets automatically for you. You don't have to worry about that. You don't even have access to those secrets. So as the managed identity is created, you get access to the account, and the account acts on your behalf in the application. It offers a simple abstraction for requesting tokens. So you don't have to go to Azure AD. You don't have to make any explicit calls. It all happens behind the scenes for you. It works like any other app or service principal for OAuth services, well, sort of, and allows you to assign rights to services via RBAC. So you might say, if you are creating your own managed identity, you might say, I only want this managed identity to access my Key Vault and nothing else. In fact, I only wanted to read secrets from Key Vault and nothing else. It is available for many Azure services. In fact, we're adding as many services as we can, as fast as possible, because it's so integral for having secure solutions. It is exposed as a local endpoint. So if you're running a VM, you can always use a URL to hit that endpoint and actually see what happens and whether that managed identity is working as expected. And finally, it provides an end-to-end security. Now, this is probably the biggest one for me. we talked about, local development and QA and production and tests or what have you. The biggest asset of managed identity, or the beauty of the service, is that it allows you as a developer to do that without really caring for secrets, no matter where you're running your application. I will show you, in fact, in a second, how to do that in code. But from my perspective, it's fantastic because whether you're running on Linux, Windows, or Mac OS, whether you're running on Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, in fact, you don't even need Visual Studio. You can use the Azure CLI to authenticate against your service. And as long as your account has been provisioned in the respective Azure service to be able to access that service, then it all works automatically for you. You move that application to production, and it starts working automatically for you as long as it's set up correctly. So that one, some scenarios here about what you can do with managed identities. You can actually use managed identity in your application to go and speak to Key Vault and get some secrets. I will demo that. You can use your managed identity to actually go to Azure AD, grab a token, and then allow you to speak to things like ARM, Office, or Graph, again, without you having to do anything other than provisioning the MSI for that. And finally, a less documented and super amazing implementations. They can use actually MSI to do service-to-service communication. So you can have an API or another app that needs to be called by your application. So you have a web app that speaks to a web API. You can actually use MSI to secure these two services as well. So that's something that is really exciting and not as well documented. And without further ado, I'm going to switch to my demos. So we're going to see how MSI is used in local development, and then I'm going to jump into running the same application in Azure and show you how that provides continuity between dev or local dev and production. So let me stop sharing, and then I'll share my VM. Any questions in the meantime?
No serious ones. There's only one that wanted to know if that was a young Troy Hunt in one of your slides.
No, I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know if I accidentally managed to grab a young Troy Hunt. I have to go back to the slides and have a look at that. That's a good spotting over there. Right. So
pretty typical from us hanging rubbish on each other.
It's fine. It's fine. Right. Application window. Switching to my VM. Let me know when you can see things. Okay. I think it's up now. Good. It's good. So what we have over here is a plain vanilla ASP.NET Core app. It's a 3.1 ASP.NET Core app. It's using Razor Pages, and it doesn't do anything insane right now. It just runs the application. If we can run it and see, it just runs the application. Doesn't have any security implementations here. And obviously, I need to grab some values from Key Vault, right? So I need to be able to communicate with Key Vault. This one's running. Let's see it up and running. There you go. See, I even created a dedicated one for you guys because I had to write a lot of code for these demos. So as I said, we're going to be looking at some preview codes. So these are vanilla app. I'm going to stop running this one, and I'm going to switch to my, let's close this. Okay. Git checkout. So I have tags. I didn't want to have to write code while we speak. So what I did was create a solution, and I'll walk you through the solution. So right now, in order for me to be able to communicate with Key Vault, I had to download two packages. One is called the Azure Identity. That's a NuGet package that allows your Azure SDKs to authenticate against Azure AD. And then I have the Azure Security Key Vault Secrets library. You can see that it is in preview. And this allows me to go into Key Vault and reach out and read some secrets. And in order for me to be able to display the secrets, in here, I don't have anything in the startup or program.cs. They're as they were before. All the magic takes place in one new page, which I called Key Vault Secrets, nicely and amply. And I will explain what the code is doing here. We're injecting a configuration because we need to get access to the config. And then on the get, so when we load the page, we check whether there's a client ID configured, and I will explain why we do that in a second. Then we create a managed identity credential, which will be used when we are in production. Yes?
Can we bump font size a little bit?
Thank you, sir.
That's all right.
Good reminder. I'm 125, which seems big to me, but let's make it bigger. How does that look like? I think it's better, right?
It should be good for people.
Perfect. So one of the new things that we introduced now is the token credential. There's a whole set of libraries that derive from the token credential. And in this case, we have the chained token credential. So what we do here is we say, depending on the environment I'm running, I need to be able to authenticate or create a credential that can be accessed by Key Vault. So in this instance, we have a Visual Studio credential, which is very specific to Visual Studio. If I am authenticated here with my account, you can't see because there's a duck over there, but if I move my Visual Studio, there you go. I have my account that is actually authenticated against Azure AD. So that account, as long as it has access to my Azure tenant, then it can authenticate with Visual Studio. But let's assume I wasn't in Visual Studio. I was writing my code in Notepad or Vim or VI or any other funky tool, right? In that instance, I don't really have Visual Studio managing the credentials for me. I can actually use Azure CLI locally installed on my machine. And as long as I have authenticated inside the Azure CLI, that credential becomes my token. And then finally, the managed identity, I said we need to have a little bit of a code here. By default, if you are using the system assigned managed identity, the one that gets automatically created for your code, then this will work out of the box. However, we also give the option to create your own managed identity. It's called the user-defined identity in effect. So you might say, I have a specific account in my Azure AD tenant. It's a service principal. And I want to use this one explicitly for my web app to be able to speak to Key Vault. Now, you can also have multiple user-assigned identities onto a resource. So the problem there becomes that as you run the code goes, I haven't found a managed identity that is system-generated. You have 10 of the user-assigned ones. I have no idea which one I'm supposed to use. So by saying, by assigning the client ID, we give the library the ability to work out which one to instantiate with, and then it runs. So at the end of running this code, I have my credential, and then here in my secret client, that's my Key Vault, I go and say, this is my Key Vault URI, and this is my credential. Now go and get me the secret. So if I run this one, my account has already been provisioned inside Key Vault and has permissions to read. So I'm running this application and will navigate to this page, and we should be able to see the Key Vault secret coming to the solution without me having to put any secrets there. Tan, 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 the moment of truth. There you go. So that's my very important secret value inside my Key Vault, and I can go and change it later so you can see that this is working. So what we established over here is that without me having to write any code explicitly, I am able to access secret values on the fly from Key Vault without any secrets, and that's the key there. But you might say, well, Chris, that's fine if I need to do it on demand, but how can I do it as part of my config? So what if I had a number of config values, like a connection string to my database, and inside my startup, now I need to access that to bootstrap my database, or I need to do my entity framework migrations. We have a solution for that one as well. So let me move to my next tag. I can type.
Just while you're doing that, making it not look like you prepared all this and that segue was just natural. A question from Aaron, believe it or not. Is there a way to work offline with any of... Oh, look at that. Yes, biggest question ever. How do we work offline, local emulators? I know for me personally, if I'm on a train, I actually run Identity server locally on my, so I basically spin up a copy of ID server because I don't have a server to connect to and authenticate against.
Sure.
If I'm running everything in the cloud.
So from a mass identity perspective, probably not. You'll need to do some defensive coding there. So if you're using, say, a Cosmos DB emulator or a storage account emulator, then you do get a local account that has a local key to work. In fact, the Cosmos DB one is a well-known key, so it's always the same. Whereas I think the storage account is use development equals true for your connection string, and that works. So for certain services, we do have offline emulators that allow you to do that. But from an authentication perspective, unfortunately, the log in, log out, sign in, sign up, and things like MSI do not work. So you need to work around that one. But in this instance, I am using Key Vault, so there's no Key Vault local emulator, I'm afraid. But that was a good question. Again, because certain things can be different, I know that a lot of companies these days are moving their development environment in Azure, in fact. So they might have a whole set of services running on Azure for the development environment, and then all they do is just point to the production instances of those services. That can be, that is more common as I'm seeing lately. So MSI is pretty applicable there. Now, we did say we have the secrets at runtime, and that's perfect. But how do I get access to config at runtime? So as I start up my application, I want to be able to go and grab my secrets from Key Vault, populate my app settings. So let me just jump quickly into my app settings. We have three things here. We have our Key Vault URI. That's the only thing I need to disclose here. I have a client ID. I don't have to populate that while I'm in the development environment. That's perfect. And then some config value coming from Key Vault. Now, let's assume that this was your connection string to your database. And inside your startup, you have some code that goes and bootstraps your database. How do I access that? There is, again, a new library that we have. It's part of the Azure SDKs. So, and unfortunately, we haven't made our life easier with the Azure SDKs, I'm afraid. So you have to bear with me here. But that library name is Azure Extensions ASP.NET Core Configuration Secrets. It's very, very long. If you want to know what the available SDKs are today, we have a whole set of libraries for you for .NET and Node and JavaScript. In fact, if you can figure it out for yourself, which I can't either, all I do is like Azure downloads. That's a page I used to own while I was in marketing. So if you come to this page, we give you all the tools that you need to work with Azure. So we have all the tools down here, storage emulators and CLIs, PowerShell, and what have you. We also have the SDKs, and all these SDKs are pointing to the new ones. So if you search in NuGet, you might not be able to find the ones that you need because we probably named the older ones easier to find, and they're the first ones that come in the results. So always use this page. So go to get the .NET SDKs, and then you come here and you can see what is available, like cognitive services and stuff. So the ones that we're seeing today come from here. Now back to my code. The package, as I said, is this one. And then we need to do a little bit of bootstrapping inside my program.cs. So as my application is starting, you'll notice there's a familiar pattern. We check for the client ID. Then we create the chain token credential. And in here, I could have Visual Studio Code. I have other tools as well. There are probably about 20 of libraries of token credentials that work. And then finally, what I do here is I say in my config, I need to add my Azure Key Vault, again, pointing to the URL and then adding the credential. And inside my page, my Key Vault secret page, you'll notice I have an extra one, which is this, the from config. So in here, I'm loading the configuration. We remember we injected it earlier on. And all I'm doing is accessing my some config value from Key Vault, which was already declared inside my app settings. So if I go and run my application now, we should see two values in that Key Vault secrets page. And this is in effect what allows you to work with MSI. Now, it might not be Key Vault. It might be your SQL Server. It might be your Cosmos DB database. We allow you via MSI to speak to those services directly without really having to disclose the keys. And again, I'm iterating the fact, I know, but the amount of times I've seen this. There you go. So this is the config value stored directly in Azure Key Vault, and it's through the config settings. So that's my demo here, but I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I know. I said, now we need to take this app and run it into Azure. Hopefully Damien is not watching me right now, but I'm going to do a right-click publish. Damien.
No. Friends don't let friends right-click deploy.
I know. But you know what? Sometimes it just works. And you know what? The next segment is actually showing how you can use service principals to deploy ARM templates and code into Azure without disclosing any secrets again in your config file. So just for the people that are saying no right-click publish, I totally get it. I'm with you guys, and I encourage you to do that. But right now, I just want to deploy the code super quickly so I can show you what happens. So I have an app service. Oh, I haven't authenticated that. All right. Oh yeah, I am here. Right. No, I am not. I need to open a new browser. So let's see, it's still deploying somewhere. Good. So I need an incognito window. And there you go. It's running right now. But I want to show you a couple of things there. Not sure if this is going to work. Let's see. And while we're waiting for that, let's jump to our production running solution. And there you go. This is super fast, by the way. So you notice that when we're doing it locally, it will take a little bit of time to bootstrap stuff, but in production, it's instant. So the secrets from Key Vault come straight away. Come on, you can do it. So that's the first bit. Let me jump quickly back to my slides while this one is authenticating, and then we'll come back to the solution because I want to show you how to troubleshoot stuff. Let me share my slides. So this is MSI in as a wrap. Now, I mentioned service principals before, and I did say MSI is using service principals behind the scenes, but what the hell is a service principal? Common question. A service principals are cloud accounts. In effect, back in the day, you had your local accounts or your network accounts in your network that would allow you or your VM or your machine to speak to some other service on the network. And it was perfect because it was managed by your IT manager or your IT pros. And you say, hey, spin me another account. I just need to speak to the database, or I need to run a daemon that has access to my to our share. And now in the cloud era, you don't have that, right? You don't have that network. You can have VNets or what have you, but you need an account that allows you to do things. Like what happens if I run an Azure function that needs to go and speak to some other service? Now, I can't provision a network account there. So your service principals are your network accounts of the future, right? It's the cloud era. And service principals do a few things like authenticating and authorizing users and services via MSI, accessing data securely with the right permissions. Again, you can use service principals to run tasks with PowerShell, CLI, functions, or what have you, and allow you to do that in a secure way and a lockdown set of permissions. And one I love really, really much is deploying code to production securely using service principals. So I don't know how many of you are using tools like ARM templates or Terraform with Azure DevOps or with GitHub Actions, but you do get the ability to run service principals or tasks via service principals that have certain permissions. Now, I did say automated tasks, daemon apps, deployment tasks, machine learning as well. So if you're doing machine learning tasks and you need to run runbooks or what have you, you do actually have access to an MSAL library in Python or .NET that do authenticate with service principals. So service principals are at your service. Disambiguating a little bit between app registration and service principals because it's always blowing our minds. Back in the old days, you had to create an app registration, and then at the back of that, you had to spin up a service principal that will reference the app registration, but it was totally dependent, and they had the permissions. I was like, oh my God, why? These days, you can actually create a service principal directly in Azure AD. So you create an account. It does create an app registration behind the scenes for you, or if you create an app registration, it will create a service principal for you automatically, so you don't have to manage these. So when you use a service principal, but you only create an app registration, it is a service principal. And the way that it helps, mentally to understand this, an app registration is it's the base class of your account. It manages the identity delegation and access management. So you have to create that inside a tenant. That tenant could be your Microsoft tenant, your local company's tenant, or your own personal tenant. And then you have your access management. So you also say that app registration that it can do certain things. And then a service principal is that an instance of that registration. You can have multiple service principals that map into that same app registration, and you use the service principals in different apps or in different solutions. And they all reference back the same app registration, so they get the same permissions and the same access levels, but you don't interact directly with the app registration. So hopefully you're still with me as I explain that one. Creating and assigning roles to your service principals. You use PowerShell or Azure CLI. In this instance, I use Azure CLI. You create a service principal with RBAC permissions in this one. You name it, and then you give it some roles. You can do the role assignment here, or you can do it in the Azure portal. Doesn't really matter. And that's it. Now, I did say that I have one scenario that I really, really love. It's actually using Azure DevOps with a service principal and Key Vault to deploy solutions to production. So I have, let me switch again, browsers or setting, and I'll jump into my local browser. So it should be this one.
And one question.
Yes.
While you're switching on.
Are the Key Vault values encrypted? Oh, yes, they are. I mean, they're so encrypted that you can also have hardware managed keys, HMIs or HMKs. HSMs, yes. Man.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's 2:30 in the morning, or 2:40. So what is the acronym? Right. So HSMs, which are actually hardware devices dedicated inside Azure Key Vault that will store your secrets in a hardware dedicated device, and it's tamper-proof. The only problem with that is that if your data center goes down for whatever reason, you only get a read access set of keys on another partner data center. So there's disaster recovery there until the original data center recovers. You don't have the ability to write your keys. Every other key that you store or certificate, it's stored encrypted inside your Key Vault instance. You can have another Key Vault instance as a disaster recovery, but again, that's also read-only. So yes, we make sure that your secrets are super stored securely. There you go. Now, let me jump into my Azure DevOps. What do we have here? We have a repo that has an ARM template, the Azure deploy. Hopefully you can see that, but let me just make it slightly bigger. It's a plain old ARM template that deploys a SQL server. So all we do is just deploy a SQL server with databases, and I say what it does. But the important thing here is that in order for me to create a SQL database and a SQL server, I need to provide an administrator login and administrator password. And the amount of times that I've seen people screw this up beyond belief, it's an understatement. So usually I jump in and I come here, and this is their server. Like I see the ARM template, like, oh man, no, you should be doing this. Whether you're using Azure DevOps or whether you're using GitHub, you should never, ever make this available through ARM templates. Funny story, side story, but at some point, I was working with a customer, and I said, how do you guys deploy your code? And they said, well, everything is stored in Git, and then we use ARM templates, and then we run them and we deploy them. I was like, okay, walk me through the process. It turns out at some point they were copying those ARM templates into Azure Storage, a public Azure Storage blob. And then they were using PowerShell to reference that blob storage and run the solution. I was like, oh my God, why? Like, why are you putting your plain old secrets in there? Regardless of the fact that we're not using Key Vault at that point, they were storing their stuff in a publicly accessible blob. So that was super scary. When they found out, they had to lock it down or whatever. But sometimes discussing with customers, you find some gems like this. So the amount of times I've seen this one, too many. So what is the solution to that? The solution is actually using Key Vault directly in your ARM templates. So in effect here, what we do is we say for my administrator login, go into my Key Vault. So it says where the Key Vault can be found, which subscription, which resource group, and what is the name of my Key Vault. And then I also give it my my actual value, or the name of the secret that needs to go and access. And in here, I do the same for the password. The nice thing about this one is that, for example, I could change or tokenize certain things here. So I could tokenize my subscription, or I could tokenize my resource group, and then have a different task for production, and a different task for or different variable values or tokens for my test, my QA, and then my production environments, or my developer environment. That means that as a developer, I don't really care about how these things are populated. Somebody in my team manages those keys in Key Vault. We have full auditing there as well. And I'm allowed to run the task and just create it for myself. So super easy. And then all I have to do is just run it. So if I go into my pipeline, I have a release task over here. I want to very, very quickly just go through that. You'll notice that in here we have, where is it? We have subscription, the Azure Resource Manager connection. So when you create these tasks, you get the ability to create, when you do an ARM template deployment through Azure DevOps, we make it nice and easy for you to create that managed identity, or the service principal. So there's a service principal inside my Azure. I think it's down here. No, sorry. I need to go into my Azure Active Directory. What was it? CM internal. And then if I look into my my app registrations, I should be able to find it here. Although it is a service principal, so it might not be here. I think it's under Enterprise Solutions. And if I can't find it there, then I'm going to move on, because I have something else to show you. Apply. You know what? I might be in the wrong tenant for this one. Anyway, let me go back here. The way that you can actually find this or create your own is if you come into your project settings. You can create connections, agent pools, settings, service connections here. So you can see that this one is mapping to the one that was automatically generated from Azure DevOps, but you can also create a new service connection here, and then you can provide your own service principal, see, automatic or manual, and then that allows you to lock things down. So for this to work, I only had to go into my Key Vault and say explicitly that this CM internal has access. So if I search my Key Vault, there you go. So inside my Key Vault, if I go into my access policies, somewhere in here, there you go, should resolve eventually. Taking sweet time. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm in the wrong tenant. That's why it's not there. But deployment principal, you notice here that has 2 permissions selected only. This is very similar to the task that we're talking about. So as long as you say, I need to get and list permissions, and as long as you give it access to do Azure Resource Management for template deployment and save that, then that account should be here and you should be able to access that. So if I were to run this one right now, I'll run it and then I'll switch back to my slides, because I have one more I want to show you, which I think is super exciting. One more demo. Run the pipeline. Again, I don't have to do anything here. All I'm saying is just run my template. I am not providing you any secrets. It goes and does it for us. Now, back to my slides very, very quickly. And then we'll do the last bit, which is what's new for authentication inside .NET Core. So up until this point, if you have been working with identity in ASP.NET, it was always tricky to identify how to call things, how to set up authentication, how to validate tokens, and how to talk to other services. So we came up with a new library for .NET Core. It's called Microsoft.Identity.web. It was announced at build. We're currently at the 0.2 preview, but we're planning on GAing very, very soon, probably before .NET 5, but just to not under promise and over deliver, I'll say we're definitely GAing at .NET 5, but you might get it sooner. In fact, the template should be dropping very, very soon inside the CLI and Visual Studio. So next time you say file new project, I want a new ASP.NET Core with authentication, you will automatically get the new libraries out of the box. However, from my perspective, when I actually talk about Microsoft Identity.web, this is what it does. It smashes through walls and makes everything super easy. So what is Microsoft Identity.web? It adapts the ASP.NET Core templates. It will only be supported from 3.1 going forward. So unfortunately, for people that are still using 2 or previous versions of ASP.NET Core, it will not be supported retroactively. After the fact. So once we release, it will be 3.1 going forward. So definitely 3.1 and 5. Older versions won't be supported. Brand new templates. Lots of helpers to validate scopes in APIs. Much easier to get controller actions. And it's confusing because with ASP.NET Core, when you create a file new project and say, I want to talk to Azure AD today, or B2C, you get a set of libraries that are the ASP.NET identity libraries. They're not the official ADAL or MSAL libraries. And that was always problematic because you had one way to authenticate against Azure AD. And then when you needed to go and grab tokens or when you needed to go and do more stuff, you had to actually go and grab the MSAL library, bring it down, create your wrapper, helper, services that would go and set up MSAL, pass the authentication tokens back, and then go and speak to your, say, graph API. Now, with only one library, you get everything out of the box. So you don't have to have a separate MSAL library to go and find the tokens, the access tokens for your additional services. So everything is wrapped into one library. So Identity.web is operating on top of MSAL, and it's bringing MSAL as part of the whole solution. So you don't have to have 2 different packages. It handles incremental consent and conditional access. We said that this is very important, especially as you add more permissions to your app. You don't have to rewrite the code. It manages token serialization. They made it super easy. There's like a one-liner, and you say, I want to add an in-memory or a session or a distributed token cache. In fact, last week, we demoed how you can add the Cosmos DB token cache into your ASP.NET Core solution. I think there will be a blog coming out this week. So as long as a token cache derives from distributed cache, then you can add it into ASP.NET Core and plug and play to the identity without really needing to do anything. And we also provide you with Issuer Validator for any Microsoft Identity providers. So multi-tenant, cloud, national cloud, B2C, all of them. Right. Let's go and do a demo because I think that's the most important bit. In fact, this one addresses the authenticating and authorizing users and services. Super, super easy. So I'll switch back to my VM. Sorry for the switching back and forth, but it's just that's how I code these days.
Variety is good.
I code it a VM because I blast it out of the face of the earth every so often, and then I don't have to worry about my dependencies or what have you. Right. So if you want to find more about the Microsoft Identity.web, it hasn't made it into docs yet. All our samples actually use the right libraries. So the latest samples use the right libraries. And there's a lot of documentation to explain how to use it, why you should be using it, what happens behind the scenes. We encapsulate a lot of the complexities there for you, and we abstract them so you don't have to worry about these things. But let's go and see how the code looks like. So I have one solution. Let me bump up the code again before you say anything. There you go. I remembered. So I have a web app and I have an API. All .NET Core 3.1. I downloaded 2 sets of libraries, the web which is the one that does the token acquisition and the handshaking or what have you. And there's a web UI. The web UI is the one that spins up when you say, I want to redirect users to my Azure AD to authenticate, and then what happens when they log out as well. You don't have to explicitly create views for that. There are also other views in there encapsulating the DLL, so everything comes out of the box. Inside my startup, I only have to add one liner here. That's the services at Microsoft Web App Authentication. It looks into the configuration. So as long as your app settings follow the standard paradigm, which is Azure AD, and then down here your information, so instance, domain, and stuff like that, then, that's not right. Then everything should work out of the box. So I should be able to authenticate without really having to do anything. And as I said, going back into my startup.cs, no, not that one, this one. It's literally a one-liner. That's all I have to do to add authentication into my solution. And then if I run my app, I think if I kick it off now. Oh yeah, and there's a add Microsoft Identity UI down here as well. So that's the one that says the MVC or Razor pages that when I want to authenticate or sign up or sign in, should present me with the right solution. So let me just close this one down, minimize that one. I'm signed in already. Let me sign out and then sign in again. Yes, fine. I want to sign in again. So you notice I'm using my own. Oh no, that's not the right one. Nope. Yes, sign out. There you go. Sign out as well. Signed out. Perfect. It's 40. Oh no, that's not the right one. Excuse me for that. Spin it up again. It was 44332. Should have known. So sign in. Choosing the right one. Now I need to find my password. Just give me a second. Azure AD has forced me to create a super strong password on my test tenant. So that's never easy, but it's a best practice, right? Secure passwords. There you go. That one, and I'm putting it there. I will also do a two-factor authentication for me. I haven't coded anything for that. It came straight out of the box. So again, that's the beauty of that. As a developer, I don't have to care about adding the extra layer of security. It just comes out of the box for me. Yes, fine. Stay sign in. There you go. That's the information that came directly from Azure AD without me having to do anything other than add one line of code here, add this line of code here. And right now, you don't get this out of the box, but you will be getting it very, very soon. And then inside my my views, if I go into my login partial, the difference here is that I'm rather than using, I think it was Azure Identity, it's now Microsoft Identity. Nothing else changes here, and it just works. But I think the biggest value that you get with this one is the ability to access APIs and work with APIs here. So I have another project here. It's an API. This is my API that goes and gets information for weather. And then for me, I had to just add a little bit of code here. The API changed, the interface changed a little bit. So now all I have to do to create a secure API out of the box, as I created, find a new project, I come in here, I add my library and I say add authentication with the .bearer default for the authentication scheme. That's optional, by the way. And then down here, I say add Microsoft Web API configuration, right? But also I could do something like dot add Microsoft Web API calls another Web API, or add Microsoft Web App calls Web API. So in my previous app, I could have done this and then get all the tokens up front, so I don't have to go and do it later. in this instance, what I'm doing here is I'm saying, you know what, this is a secure API. So when my users come and they authenticate, when they come to my API, in here, when they come to get the weather information, I verify that the users have the right scopes. That's a one-liner again. In the past, you had to write a lot of code to verify that the request that comes in has the right scopes. And then when I run it, it runs perfectly fine. And in here, I'll run the API as well. As an example, I'm going to use Postman to go and grab my token and then make a call to my API. And while this one is spinning, I'm just going to check if there are any questions. Need more code spaces. Okay, yes, true. It needs more code spaces. One of these days, I'll spin a code space and work with that, but that's a very good question. Hunter2, yes, that's my password. Hunter2 exclamation mark. Don't forget the exclamation mark. So my API is up and running. And then in here, I'm going to grab a new token. This one is pointing to my client ID. I don't care about the secret. You can see it. I'm going to wipe it out. Stupidly enough, for some weird reason, when you work Postman, it always asks for a client secret when you do authentication against Azure AD. So I'm going to request my token. It authenticates me. I say use my token. And then in here, I'm hitting my weather forecast. So I'll do a send. And lo and behold, we got the data down here. So that's it. The new Microsoft Identity.web makes your life so much easier. I know we're introducing yet another library, but trust me, this one is making your life so much easier when it comes to authenticating and authorizing users. You still plug into all the standard ASP.NET authorization stuff. So you can have policies, you can have role-based authentication and authorization. And I love it. Like all the projects I do these days do use this library when it comes to ASP.NET Core, and love it. So that's me. I think it's like 3 minutes over the hour, but if you have any questions, then now's the time.
There we go, coming through.
So one is, I haven't worked with Azure AD before, so it might be a silly question. Azure AD authentication looks great for my organization internal users, but can I use it for external users? Absolutely. Say SaaS products or whatever. Yes, you can use, you can create a multi-tenanted app for SaaS solutions. So you can still use Azure AD. So if you create the next Azure DevOps solution, right? Then that multi-tenanted app allows companies to go and register. They will create an app registration on their own tenant, and then they will be able to log in their own users in that organization against the SaaS solution you created. Now, if you are, say, Walmart and you want, or Target, or Safeway, I don't know what supermarkets you have there, so I'm trying to find examples that are universal or everybody knows. Walmart, with the pandemic, everybody had to create an account so they can get their groceries online and deliver them. Now, that doesn't make sense to use Azure AD because that's an organizational account. What you want to use there is Azure AD B2C, so business to consumer. That allows you to log in users either with a username and password, or they can use their social media accounts to create an account to your solution, and for that to be able to authenticate against your product. So we have a business to consumer, we have a business to business, we have multi-tenanted SaaS solutions, and then we have organizational solutions. And recently we announced external identities, which is the ability to onboard customers or users that are not part of your organization into your organization using their own external identity, which is my Google account or my MSA account. Is there a similar library to simplify auth for JS web clients on mobile apps? This library also works on Blazor. I forgot to mention this one, Blazor client and Blazor server. For JavaScript, we have msal.js, which will do that for you. It requires a little bit more code, but yes, it does. We do have JavaScript, we have Java, we have Node, we have Python, Ruby, and we're coming out with more libraries all the time. Yes, and looks like I might go to Azure AD then. Yes, please. I mean, if you want to speak to me in private and tell me why you would like to use Okta over Azure AD, or why you should be using Azure AD, then I think I gave you way too many examples today why having that. And if your organization already using it and paying for it, if you have Office in your company, you already have an Azure AD account. People don't even know about that. You don't have to pay for it. So if you have, in fact, my test tenant has an Azure AD instance, I am not paying for it because Azure AD gives you so many users for free and so many logins for free. So even at that point, you don't have to pay for it. There are other premium tiers as well. So if you want to do conditional access, then you have to be on a P1, I think, which is the first premium tier. But from a developer perspective, I think, or even from an enterprise perspective, the ability to securely code your solution, all backed up by Azure AD, and then deploy your solution again securely, and then easily authenticate your users, then yes. I think MFA should be supported. I think we did some changes for COVID to allow a lower barrier for people to use our tools. I will have to check and get back to you on that one, but let's say 85%, I think, that MFA is supported right now without having to pay for a premium tier, if that makes sense. Oh, there's a previous question. Oh, yeah. What is the suggested best practice to store values in Key Vault? For example, if in one of our previous projects, we stored all secrets in one JSON. Oh, God, why? Which was stored in AWS. Why? So Key Vault secrets allow you to have individual secrets per secret, like individual values per secret name. So key value pair. You get individual auditing per secret. So if you have a connection string that connects to the database, then you can find out who's accessing it from where and when, and that allows your IT team to do proper auditing. Also, if you are pretty, you need to be pretty certified in terms of security. So if you work in a medical solution where user data should be super locked down, and then you get lots of auditing, external auditing, then your secrets should be stored individually inside Key Vault. Also, you can rotate your secrets inside Key Vault automatically without you having to go and manually do that. And that means that if you have all your secrets lumped up into one JSON file and you do that, then how are you going to rotate these secrets? It's going to be super hard. So from my perspective, I think that best practices wise, everything should be stored individually and managed individually for better auditing and better key rotation and stuff like that. You can invalidate keys and access to specific resources for those service principals as well. So again, that's something else. If you give access to one large lump of JSON that has all your secrets, then also everything is encrypted, right? So it should be super secure. I hope that answers the question. One thing I didn't mention, one super thing I didn't mention, and I found out while I was creating this code, is that nowadays there's a configuration service in Azure that allows you to store configuration settings across multiple solutions securely in one place. And that's like a distributed store for all your apps. If you search in Azure for configuration or app configuration, then you can find that. That also uses, I think, Key Vault in the background to store your secrets, so you don't have to manage that yourself. But if you have multiple apps needing to access the same resources or need to access the same keys, then you can store them in one place only. There you go.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. That was great. I think we will, obviously, if any questions come through while we're wrapping up, we'll ask them as well. But James, should we kick across to prize mode?
All right, prize mode. Great talk. Okay, over to the prizes. So, number one. Now, remember, whoever answers first and correctly wins the prize for each of these. And only one prize per handle. So if you want two prizes, you at least need to fake two handles. Yes, unlike in a physical user group, it's a bit harder to do. But anyway, back to the question. So, what does MSI stand for in the context of this talk? Not the installer, okay?
And not the laptop maker.
Ooh, look, already got an answer.
Oh, boom.
Okay, Martin Thomas got that one. Okay, send me a message on Meetup afterwards and with your email address. And the second question.
And it better relate to Martin Thomas. So I was just going to send you an email. It was me.
Yes, and it needs to be from someone with roughly the same name, or at least we trust you. So what are service principals? I mean, what are they and how do you use them? Very quickly. in just one sentence?
Oh, gosh.
Or 2 sentences?
And 3 hand-wavy gestures.
Not bad. Maybe we'll have to have Christos adjudicate on this one if we get multiple answers.
To make it easy.
All right. This one's not speed. This is Christos' personal choice. All right.
Well, I think it's a first come, first serve. So I don't know who types faster, but I think Stephen Mitheos is the one that was.
Robert one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was Robert I. Robert.
As long as you're happy with that answer.
Robert E 112. He was the first one, so faster.
Very concise. All right. So we've got Robert and we've also got Martin. So send me your email address through Meetup and I'll forward you through the license details.
Put it in the Twitch channel stream, you know. No one will abuse it from there.
Well, that was what I was thinking.
Password, we can then register the account for you.
Yeah, if you want to put your credit card number in as well, that would just be dandy.
Don't forget the pin. Don't forget the pin, please.
Oh, gosh.
Oh no, actually, we do have
security talk. What do? We just give away our.
So yeah, it's fine if you want to keep your email address private or put it in the channel. Good choice. All right. We got anything else, Richard?
No, we just want to say again a massive thanks to Chris for joining us at the crazy time of 2 a.m. in the morning. It's witching hour now. Yeah. So we'll all drink a coffee in celebration. I hope tomorrow is a day off for you. Otherwise, you know, it's work from home.
I'm actually streaming in about 4 hours.
Oh gosh.
Oh wow.
It's fine. I was born for this. Hey, thanks for having me. It was a blast, and it was great to actually put this together because it did bring a lot of new stuff that I haven't worked with before. And I was working with the Azure SDKs team to make sure that everything was kosher and as it should be best practices. So I'll be sharing my slides, and I will probably put the code onto GitHub so you can go and grab it and have a play around if you want to. No secrets there, but I appreciate your having me. I had this crazy time and for managing with my incoherence. So thank you.
That was great. And thank you everyone for joining, as always, spending an evening with us. We're going to wrap it up. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next month. Suggestions are welcome as always, and we out as soon as James hang up.
Goodbye.